am delighted to welcome Andrej Zukov, the founder of Corrily and an Y Combinator alumnus. Andrej holds a PhD in natural language processing from the University of London and has extensive experience in pricing optimization through machine learning and statistical models. His impressive career includes roles at BlackRock and Digital Genius, where he applied his expertise in financial modeling and NLP. Without further delay, I present you Andrej Zukov. Welcome, Andrej. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jordi. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, good. Super happy to have you here.
Likewise.
So, you are working in this Corrily company, right? That you founded. Tell us what is. Could you explain how Corrily is doing and how you're using AI?
Absolutely. So Corrily is a price optimization startup, and our target market are web-based consumer subscription companies. So you can think of those companies as companies that have a pricing page that gates their product, and typically they will have one or more plans that their users can subscribe to. Now, the nice thing about these consumer subscription companies is that, really their clientele, their users are spread across the world, right? So unlike in history, nowadays, you can subscribe to some of these companies regardless of where you sit in the world. And as the internet has democratized across all age demographics, it also means that different demographics are typically using consumer subscription services. Now, what that means is that if you are a consumer subscription company, you are targeting many, many, many different people, typically with a single set of prices. And the hypothesis of Corrily is that that is inefficient. And as a result of that, you need to set better prices. And that's where the price optimization comes in. So what Corrily allows these companies to do is to run price experiments to better match the prices they have with the willingness to pay of their user bases. So as an example, the willingness to pay in the United States is very different from the willingness to pay in India. By perhaps lowering prices in India, you actually stand to generate more revenue in the end because your conversion will shoot up as a result. So that is just one very simple example of what's otherwise a much more complex problem.
Wow, that's impressive. That's amazing. A great use case of artificial intelligence and machine learning to get into all that. But you're doing a lot of things, and I would like to talk with you today about this project that you are now, I believe, kind of launching or almost to launch, and I think it's impressive, called UnSurvey. Right? So could you tell us what UnSurvey is?
Yes, absolutely. So let me preface this by just saying that as we were running Corrily, one of the things we kept seeing is that we kept actually seeing B2B companies come to us and say, hey, the way we set our price is not only through trying different prices, the way a consumer company may, but also through knowing what the price of our competition is. And Corrily as a product does not address B2B companies, but that got us thinking. One of my co-founders is actually an expert in pricing and has a background in it, specifically in the B2B space, worked as a consultant in it as well. And, believe it or not, the way consultants gather information is really through conversations. And so that got us thinking there might be something we could be doing in that space. What we settled on is we settled on identifying that there is a gap between surveys and one-to-one conversations. So let me explain what I mean by that. So if you think of surveys as sitting on one end and one-to-one conversations as sitting on another, then if I send you a survey, and a survey is, tick boxes and radio buttons and maybe selecting between 1 to 10, then that is something which is very scalable. I can send it to 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people. And it's very easy to scale. but it doesn't necessarily give me a certain depth, a certain qualitative depth that only a conversation can give. On the flip side, conversations very difficult to scale. You and I only have so much time in a week to speak to only so many people. We definitely can't speak to 1,000 people as much as we would have wanted to, unless we're, talking at them. So very difficult to scale, but the depth of insight, the depth of information that can be extracted through a conversation is many orders of magnitude deeper than that of a survey. And so that got us thinking, well, surely there is a way of combining the scalability of surveys with the depth of human conversations. And you'll be unsurprised to know that with AI, that's exactly what we can do. So what UnSurvey is at its most basic is it's a way of leading scalable conversations to give you in-depth insight across the people that you are speaking with. So you can do that at scale and get the same depth.
Wow, that's impressive. So you say, hey, let's go past the time of surveys, which are, I'll tell you, a little bit annoying, right? When you have to answer, more than one of those in a day. But on the other hand, when you are asking open questions and you're having conversations and follow-up questions, which is what we humans are good at, then the problem is how can your customers scale that? Now with AI today, now it's possible. I don't know if 2 years ago, right, that same UnSurvey project would have been more difficult. And as with your experience and knowledge of natural language processing, exactly that would have been difficult. But now that's an amazing use case of using large language models to do that, right? I'm assuming. So how do you think this large language models have changed the field of natural language processing?
Oh, I mean, you and I both know very well that, it has been a complete sea change. I think, look, one way of thinking about how they've changed the industry, and perhaps this is more of an old school way that you and I both get. I think there are other ways, but I think one way in which it has changed the industry is that I like to think of LLMs as almost having millions of different little classifiers and other sort of such models embedded within them that are now easily accessible simply through a prompt. So, only a couple of years ago, NLP was split between dozens of different use cases that researchers in different verticals were solving. So you had people focused on entity recognition and entity linking and knowledge graphs. You had people focused on translation. You had people focused on sentiment analysis. You had people focused on, model upon model upon model family, each designed for a separate use case. And I think what's so amazing about LLMs is that they collapse all of that into a single model, which also happens to just be better than any one of those historical models ever were. But more than that, and this is where I think it gets really exciting, is that we can think of those that old school NLP and the models that arose from it as only kind of a subset of all the things that LLMs are capable of. And so what I mean by that is, we like to think about, let's say, when I can talk more about that in a second, but when we design these UnSurvey conversations, oftentimes we'll give the AI a graph-like template to follow, a flow to follow, as it were, that has different branches and so on. And one of the things that we've really begun to appreciate about modern day LLMs is that you can get them to run very complex logic using very simple prompts. So, let's say if we needed a classifier for Belgian chocolate, is this Belgian chocolate or is this not Belgian chocolate? An LLM would be able to do that immediately, right? If you asked me to do that 4 years ago, I would have spent a minimum of, let's say, 3 days quickly compiling some kind of training set and then giving you a Belgian chocolate specific binary classification model. Right. And I think that's the, that's the difference, the different world we now live in.
Absolutely. I don't know if you would agree on that, right? But that's what I was thinking is in the old times of, let's say, software development, right, and programming, it's kind of driving a car, right? You have
Yeah.
you have a number of tools which are your car, and you complete a mission. Now, um, using an LLM for the task that you want is a little bit like riding a horse, meaning it's going to do what you want, kind of, but but it's going to add its own logic, right? So this prompt engineering is more like a partnership between
Yeah.
you as a rider and the horse as the actual
Yeah.
doing the hard work, but it has its own will. And I'm assuming that what you said, that's amazing, right? It's like relatively simple prompts can produce complex outcomes, but I'm assuming that just because of what you said, it doesn't mean that um, building UnSurvey is an easy thing. I guess you guys have been,
Absolutely.
having a lot of time, kind of taming these horses, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, to just speak about UnSurvey for a little bit, one of the things that we are noticing is that, first of all, LLMs drastically reduce the development cycle of new software. And we've really started to appreciate that as a team, right? The speed at which you can move now is truly incredible. Just before this call, I was working on some updates to our website. I'm an engineer. I'm not a front-end engineer. And yet with just the basic engineering skills that I have, I can move at a crazy pace, using these LLMs. So let me preface this by saying that
Mhm.
this has been the fastest building experience of some new product in my career. That said, I think that we are moving into a world where the application layer of LLMs is now being explored by the industry. And one of the things that you still needs to do in the application layer, assuming we're not going to get to AGI next year, is you still need to SaaSify products. So you still needs to kind of build all the various things around the LLM that might be powering your core AI proposition. And really that's where most of the time, has been spent. With regards to how these conversations are led, I mean, it relies on research, but again, an insanely fast iteration cycle to implement that research. So I almost think that the moat that generally AI application layer companies are going to have is never really going to be in the AI by definition. They're not foundational players and so on. And it's really going to be in what is the UX experience of operating this thing as a user, and that's where we've put most of our emphasis on.
Wow, that's amazing. And you mentioned AGI, right? Artificial
Yes.
General Intelligence, right? So now it's like everybody seems to go after that, and after the invention of the transformer architecture, right? It looks like you put these transformers and you spend a few $100 million in GPUs, and ta-da, you're gonna get
Yeah.
general artificial intelligence. What do you think? Do you think we're gonna get this AGI anytime soon?
So I would say that, look, transformers in my mind um, are a necessary but an insufficient step towards AGI. And
Oh,
the reason I say this is the way I think about transformers is as having solved type one reasoning. You know, I think there's a lot of reasoning that we as humans do that comes natural to us. We don't sit and sort of sketch out a plan of how we attack a
mhm,
problem and then we solve an equation and so on. But it really comes through experience, right? And in my mind, another way of saying this is that transformers and transformer-like architectures, as well as convolutional architectures, have in some way solved, unsupervised learning.
mhm.
And I think that, again, I think this is a prerequisite, but it's not necessarily quite it when it comes to AGI. So here's kind of how I see the next 1 to 3 years playing out. Um, just looking at what we're seeing in the industry now. So one is, I think there are going to be pushes for better and better architectures that surpass transformers, right? So one of the beautiful thing about transformers is that the reason why they're better than the RNNs and LSTMs that came before them is that, because of this self-attention module that they
Mhm.
have, they could capture long distance dependencies in text. And as a result of that, also, they were, because of the architecture itself, they were very easily trainable. You could parallelize the training, whereas
Mhm.
in RNNs, you always had to sort of compute the next step. Now, that's during training, but RNNs actually have an advantage over transformers in inference. So this is when you're, generating a prediction.
Huh.
And one of the problems with transformers is they're actually reasonably slow at generation, right?
Hmm.
And this is especially felt, by the way, in voice AI, right? Because in voice
Mhm.
AI, every kind of latency hike really, really counts. So to make these things more natural, we're either going to have much smaller models
Right.
or much faster models that might be the same size. So the architecture that is probably going to be explored there most in the next 3 years is this Mamba architecture that people are talking about. And again, to summarize, the Mamba architecture basically it sort of uses a convolution like model on the training side, and then on the inference side it uses a recurrence like model, but there's a lot more to it. But essentially it's almost like an RNN for generation with some smart hacks.
Wow.
um so that's going to be like really interesting. The other thing is, look, multimodality. Like, I'm so fascinated by multimodality. I think that in our voice domain, so because UnSurvey deals with conversations, we're currently still in a pipeline stage. So when I speak to UnSurvey, there is a speech to text model that
Mhm.
transcribes it into text. There, it then gets sent to an LLM, and the LLM then sends it to a text to speech model, which vocalizes it to me. And
That's the way
wrapping
to
all
do
of
it
this,
today.
right,
Yes.
the only way to do it right now. And
There's the
and
only
the
way around. Yeah.
and wrapping that is a model called a voice activity detection model, or VAD, which is a separate thing, which basically judges whether my silence is because I've stopped speaking and I've made my point, or because I'm thinking.
Hmm.
And this is not the best way of doing conversations. And so now we're moving into a world where voice to voice models are only a few months away. And they basically get rid of that entire pipeline. Now, imagine multimodal to multimodal models. And what I'm most excited about there is, can we get an innate understanding of physics, built into our models, and how does that help these models? So, even dogs, for example, if you take a bottle of water and you
Yep.
sort of shake it in front of a dog, and then you sort of release your hands, if the bottle of water was to remain static in the air and gravity wasn't to pull it down, the dog would freak out.
And
and
I would too.
and so would you. And that's basically because in like the next token prediction of visual reality, that never happens, and so it would be an extremely surprising event. So, I think that's going to be interesting. And then finally, I think maybe the thing that is most going to get conflated with AGI is multi-step tool usage, or what people are calling agentic workflows. And on the agentic workflow side, I think that there are going to be some incredible advances, especially in programming. Being able to say, I need a small app that inputs data from etc. and then outputs, a CRUD endpoint that I can hit, and then write me another program that uses that to send emails to etc. So stuff like that, I think, will be possible very soon. But to be honest, from an AGI perspective, I think the big thing that's missing is intent, is sort of like a model's ability to operate in the actual real world with goals in a changing environment. And so I don't really see examples of that yet, even on the horizon.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And there are many reasons that I love doing this podcast, but one is to learn from individuals just like yourself. So, and for the audience, look it up. Mamba, voice-to-voice interfaces, agentic workflows. These are the great stuff that is just around the corner and is going to yet again change AI again
Again.
forever. So that's impressive. And now I understand something about UnSurvey that I didn't when you first describe it, but it's going to be a voice interface. It's not. I imagine that would be like a text, like a chat kind of a chatbot kind of thing. But no,
Sure.
it's fully voice oriented, right?
So this is where I think, the UX complexity of it really, really, really comes into play, right? Um, One of the things that so we started off building it as only voice,
Mhm.
and then once we did that, we noticed two things. And these are those like really golden drop nugget UX learnings that you only get by putting these things out in the wild. So what we discovered is that there's a subset of people that are very good at not stopping to think. And they really enjoyed
Right. I agree
using,
on that.
right? They really enjoy using this voice interface that we built, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it's just, you just keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And then maybe finally, once you've made your point, you stop. The model knows it's an actual stop.
Mhm.
And then it says something and you keep going. There are two more kinds of people. There's another group of people that definitely pauses to think before they say anything. And oftentimes, by the way, a pause to think is also a function of the question that's being asked.
Mhm.
So, if I ask you what your name is, you'll reply immediately. If I ask you what you think of the quarterly earnings of XYZ company, you'll probably pause to think. And so, but there is a subset of people that just naturally, even as part of an answer, will pause multiple times. And that really trips up the voice
Huh.
activity detection model. And so the solution for that is to make it turn-based, is to have a tap to talk function, almost
Okay.
like walkie-talkies,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. It's
That
like
can
you press when you are actually speaking. Yeah, which is not
exactly,
natural, but maybe is the best way to have that solved.
exactly. And the third group hates talking. So they need to text. They just dislike the very modality of speaking to anyone, let alone an AI. And those are the kinds of UX things that I think companies are having to deal with in the real world. Um, I would love to highlight, for example, in a completely opposite use case, nothing to do with voice, but I think, for example, Anthropic is really pushing the fold with some very basic UX updates to some of their models. But for
Uh-huh.
example, the very fact that they have a split screen where on the right hand side they show the generated code instead of one big block. I mean, that
Uh-huh.
has been hailed as like a UX revolution, right? um, but this is what I mean. Like we're still in the beginnings of so many UX improvements in this space that even if we stopped all AI development today, we could easily have 10 years of just improving products.
Just reiterating so on what we have already, right? And
Yeah,
so we are. I would say that with you go to ChatGPT, it's like being in the MS-DOS world, right? It's all
yeah,
text
yeah,
based. You
yeah.
type your stuff, right, and they get your prompts. But that's gonna change dramatically. Um, do you know some use cases where large language models have been applied successfully for practical applications?
Yeah. Um, so I was chatting to a company yesterday, a Y Combinator company as well. I think they're
Nice.
doing some amazing work. And what they're doing is they are automating SDRs, right? And now
Okay.
I think there has been a promise for the past year that, okay, AI will automate sales and we won't have AEs and we'll have AIs selling stuff and taking calls. And honestly, I think the industry has not done particularly well in doing that.
Uh-huh.
But I do think that there are low hanging fruits that can be solved. So this company, I think, is very effectively solving, as are others, are very effectively solving automated email outreach. And when I say
Uh-huh.
automated email outreach, I don't just mean email number one. I also mean email number two as a
All of
response to something that someone sent back. Like, for example, say that someone says, oh, not important for me this quarter, reach back next quarter. Like, it'll do that. Or let's say it says, I'm out of office today, please email Tony with anything urgent. It'll email Tony just to let Tony know that it's on the radar, and then it will email the person when they come back from holiday, right? So
that's
these kinds
amazing.
of use cases, I think, are again things that are being worked on. Another example on the voice domain that's working exceptionally well is sales training, right? So
Right.
if I get an AI to sell, way too risky, right? Because the deal may fall through because our AI doesn't work, let's say. But one
Mhm.
of the biggest pain points for a company CRO is when some new sales rep comes into the team, and because they haven't been trained properly, they lose a deal. And so now there are companies that are actually helping sales reps role play,
Mhm.
which really brings them up to the 80%, 80% sort of readiness. And then the last 20%, I guess, are done by role playing with the rest of the team. But these are they're like, and I'm just highlighting two examples in the sales side. I mean, I think there's examples in legal tech. There are countless examples on the consumer side. Like I sat on a plane recently with a kid who must have been maybe 16 or 17, and on the entire flight, not only did he purchase Wi-Fi on board, uh, but he also spent the entire time chatting with his AI girlfriend, uh, on
Oh
a
my God.
3-hour flight. uh, so we are entering this world, maybe not as quickly as some folks expected, but we are entering it, and it's not going to go back.
No, I totally agree. And I was watching the other day kind of this presentation from these folks at MIT about the liquid neural networks. Now, I
Yes.
must tell you, all this obscure math goes well beyond my mental capacities. But the way they describe that is, hey, we're not now talking about changing the transformer and using some other kind of neural networks. Is they are thinking about an entire different approach to what an artificial neuron is, and therefore a total different way of thinking about neural networks, and they call this liquid neural networks, especially for robotics and self-drive cars and all that. That's absolutely amazing. So maybe I don't know. Now it's 2024, right? So in 2026, the liquid neural network is going to be the big thing. So it's going to be amazing. What do you think the future of AI is about to bring for us?
I mean, I think it leads to a couple of things. I think there's going to be there already is, and already a very immediate impact on programming. And so as a result of that, I think that in general, people, or rather companies, will have much leaner and smaller development teams that will achieve much more than ever before. I think we already see that happening, and it's a very interesting occurrence. It also begs the question of, like, if you haven't gone through a traditional CS to development path, then if you're going into the industry without those fundamentals, what does it mean? I think it's still open for debate. But anyway, that's one big thing I see changing. I think on the business side, one of the things I'm most interested by is, assuming that what this AI will be replacing is not the plumbers of this world, but the McKinsey consultants of this world.
I like it.
Um, I think we may be moving into a world where what previously were service sector, white collar service sector margins, so the billable hours of consultants, the lawyers of this world, and so on, that we may be moving into a world where those margins, which were always thin and could never be scaled because they always had to be scaled by employing more consultants and more people, that those margins are going to turn into software SaaS-like margins. And I think that we're going to move from a world of maybe, software as a service to service as a software, right? And
Oh,
I think that's
wow.
going to
I
be
love it.
quite interesting. um,
Service as a software. That man, you need to patent that.
and and then there's other things. I mean, I'm not an expert on the consumer side, other than what I see, and I'm always fascinated by what I see. I mean, I do think that there are such large opportunities in education specifically, and I think that those opportunities are ones that can really democratize education. I'll give you an example. In the UK, many children will be ushered by their parents to
Mhm,
prepare for, sometimes on years on end, for interviews to get into some of the top private schools in the country.
mhm.
That kind of tutoring, whether it's done via a tutor that costs money or whether it's done by a parent, in which case you need enlightened parents to be able to
Yep.
do that for you, is not something that's widely accessible, right?
Hmm.
So, but imagine a world where you can build a child's confidence through their communication with an LLM, right? Much like the sales training example from before. So these are all examples where I think, LLMs in the future will play really meaningful roles. And yeah, I can't
Yeah.
wait for
Yeah.
products
Yeah.
like that.
And over the last 50 years, right, we have built the internet and the software, the application. We've been building layers to basically enslave ourselves. And now when we work, we use the keyboard and the mouse and the monitor. And we work like that. I was watching the other day looking at some pictures of people working during the 70s. These guys have no computers on the table. So I wonder, what did they do?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
That's
yeah,
hard to imagine,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
maybe one day, as this voice to voice and agentic workflows and all this technology arrive, I'm basically going to talk more and
yeah,
listen more than type and concentrate. Oh, wait, how do I transform my Google document into an HTML format that's something, something, right? It's like,
yeah,
where we spend an, or just okay, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I get to work. Oh boy, I have 70 emails. Okay, let's just start with the first one. Okay,
yeah,
versus
yeah,
having a conversation where I plug my headset and say, "Hey, what's new? Any exciting new email today?" That
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's where I think we are going to go, right? And because humankind has never been super disruptive. It's always about incremental steps. And as these models get multi-model, they will eventually, I guess, be able to operate our computer entirely, take care of our
yes,
email, our calendar invite, not to mention our beloved CRM, right? And all that. And
yes. Oh,
essentially,
that is a massive opportunity waiting for someone to crack the
exactly.
CRM side of things. Yeah,
So yeah, I'm super excited about that, and I don't see that there's going to be a mass loss of jobs, but the kind of the opposite. And just as what you said, right, about kids maybe being better trained in softer skills, right, and communication and public speaking and reasoning, other than um, internet operators, which some to some extent part of our time has been split into that. What do you think?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's again, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I think there's a lot of recent study which shows that around 2012 there was a giant spike in anxiety amongst children, and as a function of social media. So
Right?
suddenly we went from a world where maybe our close knit group of friends was our crowd, or maybe at most our school, to now a kid does something in one school. I mean, the entire city of schools knows, or maybe the entire internet knows, right? So you're being thrust
Yes.
into this arena. And I think one of the things that happens in these big arenas that we now live in is that a different kind of person performs better in an arena like that. And I think that obviously has political ramifications. Like, we all know that the people that are posting on the internet, there's some Wikipedia page law. It's not Goodman's law, but it's maybe something like that, which basically says, like 5% of people are really the ones that are commenting. Everyone else is just lurking. They're
Right.
watching.
Yeah.
They're not commenting, they're not engaging, they're not even liking,
Yeah.
but they're there, they're present, they're in the crowd.
Mhm.
And that's a very, very different world from the one in which only a generation ago, like, people grew up in. So
Yeah. Like
I
mine.
think AI could be a way potentially to bring us not back, but bring us to some new kind of setting that
Yeah.
maybe better for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive. Listen, that's super interesting, but I want to be respectful with your time. I think you are very busy with UnSurvey, so I want to thank you so much for helping us here and talking to us. That's amazing. Just one last question for our audience that would like to contact you with follow up or learning more about the UnSurvey. What would be the best way to contact you?
Absolutely. So add me on LinkedIn. I'm sure my name will be with the video, but my name is Andrej Zukov Gregorich. That's the full spelling of it. And if you want to reach out via email, I'm also accessible via that. You can always send me an email at andre@unsurvey.com. The website is unsurvey.ai, but for all the spammers out there, my actual email is andre.com. So please
that's
please reach
that's
out.
that's
Please
smart.
reach out to me there.
That's very smart. All right, Andre, thank you so much for being here
Thanks,
again.
Rudy.
And thank you so much for our audience. We have many oncoming, exciting podcasts, so stay tuned. Thank you so much.